80s and 90s.
They
Not
do.
only were they
Yeah.
incredible people during, they made it for a long time.
Yes, Virginia Hall died youngest of all of them, I believe. And what's very amazing is Vera Atkins was a habitual chain smoker for her entire adult life and probably started smoking when she was quite young. She was born in Romania, and still she lived to be quite old. And Jane Fawcett, the Bletchley Park cryptanalyst, she died while I was writing this program. So I decided to, the role of the cryptanalyst was going to be a thematic device to push the story forward in terms of key events of the invasion of the Soviet Union, the Holocaust, and then D-Day. But instead, when Jane passed away while I was researching, I decided to focus on Jane. Jane is incredible because she actually deciphered the Enigma message that allowed the Allies to sink the Bismarck, which was the most feared German battleship at that time. So there's a whole program that could be done just about Jane Fawcett. And yet, yeah, so we still have so many more things that we could talk about.
And if you have questions, you just go down to your chat box and type them in for us. Then we'll get to as many of them as we can. And we've noticed that have the women been retroactively granted the military honors they deserved? We're talking about the WWII here. And if so, when did that happen? Referencing the comment that they were considered civilians and didn't get funerals paid for, even the flag on their coffins.
Yes. So Jimmy Carter retroactively enlisted these women who had served as volunteers in the civilian branches of the military, retroactively made them enlisted members of the military. But it was not until President Obama's administration that these women could be buried in Arlington National Cemetery.
And
so,
were
yeah,
any of those
it was
still
quite a
alive?
long time, quite a long time. And
Okay.
specifically, the WASPs were the ones that were in the Oval Office when President Obama signed the executive order allowing the women who served in the Air Force, but I believe it's also other branches of the military. It just happened to be a movement that was spearheaded by the WASP program, the Women Air Force Service Pilot Program.
At one point, you mentioned the Enola Gay and some reference to the women be involved in that. Was that a direct reference or just?
Yeah, yeah. So let's see if I have it up here. I do. So Anne Baumgartner, people often ask, why did you choose the people that you chose? So that's one thing that I'll address. Specifically, Anne Baumgartner. If you look at the WASPs, there are there are wonderful websites and resources where you can find out lots of primary information about the WASPs. Oral histories that are incredible. I have the whole oral history for Lorraine Rogers, who got out of the Vultee vibrator, the BT-13, upside down, and then they blamed her for leaving the plane, but it was just that nobody had ever done it with that plane before. So these primary sources are phenomenal. What was amazing for me about Anne Baumgartner is she wrote her own autobiography. So a lot of these WASPs and a lot of these civilian members of the armed services, they would write essays, or they would write a journal entry or a magazine article or a newspaper sort of column that it was a few paragraphs, and I needed someone's life story, right? I needed to know why she joined the WASPs, what was going through her head. Anne Baumgartner was actually working at a laboratory in Manhattan, and she went up to the roof of the office building in Manhattan to take her lunch break and saw an airplane fly overhead, and that she quit her job that day. She quit her job that day and started learning how to fly. And these women, Virginia Hall and Anne Baumgartner, came from families of means. And I think that's an important distinction to make for a couple of reasons. Coming from a family of means means that you do have the ability to do something as rash as quit your job and learn how to fly airplanes with the hopes of flying an air ambulance full time and then becoming a WASP. But also it means that they didn't need to do these things. They had the luxuries of comfy living. Virginia Hall's family owned several movie theaters. They had a huge farm, lovely acreage of landscape and nature where they could really retreat from a war situation if they had so wanted to do so. Anne Baumgartner's family was involved in the Poland Springs, which is a water company based in the Northeast, the Poland Springs Company. So they were involved in very big organizations, very big companies, but still they felt it was their sacred duty. And that is a word, that phrase is used multiple times in this script because I heard and saw it used multiple times in the writings and the words, the oral histories of the women that were being involved in this program. I'm gonna show you a book that I have here, which is Anne Baumgartner's autobiography. It's called A Wasp Among Eagles. The actual author says Anne B. Carl. She goes on to marry a gentleman who's an engineer for the Army Air Force. He becomes an aerospace engineer for NASA. And 50 years after Anne Baumgartner first flies that XP, the Bell jet, the Bell XP the jet plane, that's the word I'm looking for. They actually invite her to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum where she and the first man to fly a jet plane do a talk, and there's a really cool photo of them. So I mean, there's great. What I love about this is not only is it her whole life story, which I've obviously like highlighted quite a bit, but she has her pictures that she chose from her personal collection, right? So now I not only have her words, but I have images. I do have this on the computer somewhere, but it's going to be pretty hard for me to find it. So that's her at Smithsonian Air and Space Museum 50 years later. And I have these all scanned into the computer. It's just a little bit more time's taking for me to find them in the files. But it was great to have an autobiography. There's a wonderful book about Virginia Hall called The Wolves Are at the Door. That's by Judy Pearson. There's another one that came out, A Woman of No Importance, which they're making a film based off of that actual novel. So all of these women have some great resources and great biographers who have covered their stories.
Which was one of the questions that one of our viewers had said was, do you recommend any particular books to read more on these topics?
Oh yeah. I mean,
any other ones that you would like?
Oh yeah. I mean, I might run and go get a couple if that's okay. I'm gonna actually show you them because I have them right in here.
In the meantime, those of you that have other questions, we have a few more, but if you have, just type them into the little chat box.
So, you thought that was going to take a long time, but it didn't really take a long time. So this is The Wolves Are at the Door. This is Spy Mistress about Vera Atkins. It's a tough book to read. I'm not going to lie. The gentleman who wrote it, what is his name? William Stevenson. He has a slightly misogynistic tone in his writing. I'm just going to be honest there, but it is a very good informational book, even if you don't like the tone that he takes toward the woman that he's writing about. So keep that in mind. I took it for the facts, not necessarily for the tone. There is another one if you want to about the Bletchley Park girls. I went to Bletchley Park, and Bletchley Park has a really great resource online on their website if you want to, especially because they're also closed because of COVID-19. They've made much more of their archives available online, so you can actually hear some oral histories of the girls that worked there. And there is Atomic City was a book that I read that was about more so the Allied home front effort of in Tennessee, where they were they were testing out the atomic bomb, and each girl sort of knew one step of what was going on, and she didn't know what came before that, and she didn't know what came after that. You only knew what you needed to know. So those are the books that are popping into my mind off the top of my head, and if more come to my mind, I will certainly there's so many Jackie Cochran, I mean, Jackie Cochran, for those of you who are not familiar, she learned how to fly so she could sell her own cosmetic line. And it was one of the most popular cosmetic lines in the entire country in the 30s and 40s. So,
Two of our listeners are asking about this, both Gregory Bechtel and another person. Was anyone reprimanded for sabotaging the WASP flames? And as what Greg puts it, I was appalled to learn that male service members would actually sabotage, murder their female counterparts. What's the story?
yes, I was appalled as well. And there's a lot going on psychologically here that we have to keep in mind. Remember, these men felt that they had been subjected to reject duty. They were dealing with not only reject airplanes, but they were dealing with women. And I will be honest, Anne Baumgartner very clearly states in her autobiography one of the reasons she left Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, is because she disliked how badly the women were treating the maintenance crews and the men there. That the women were actually very catty. They would be in these little groups and they would not go up and talk to the maintenance crews, thank the maintenance crews for servicing their airplanes. And Anne did believe that it was a two-way street, that the acrimonious sort of atmosphere that was being created with the catty girls, the catty wasps, was making it more difficult for these maintenance crews, these men, to want to do their jobs. And there was angst and anger and there was fear because we were in a state of war. So there were so many different psychological criteria to factor in. Were they ever actually incarcerated or court-martialed? No. Because even though Jackie Cochran did come down to investigate, she refused to submit a report that would make these men look like they had done something wrong, because she felt it would more likely unravel the WASP program. So that was why she promised the girls, she made them take a vow of silence. And really, these girls went in there knowing that they could lose their lives, but they knew they could lose their lives anyway. We were just hopeful that it wasn't going to be from sabotage. Of the 38 that died, that was not all sabotage. There were, about 6 instances that we know of where the planes clearly had been tampered with, or some foreign material had been put into the gas tank to stop up the engine. But the others did have either mechanical failure in the air that was not the result of any negligence or sabotage, or they just simply weren't qualified enough to endure the challenges of this type of flying. These girls were flying basically aerial acrobatics. They were doing all sorts of figure eights and crazy maneuvers, because the gunner trainees and the spotlight trainees had to practice in the nighttime following their airplanes. So in order for them to practice following airplanes, these girls had to do, crazy somersaults, dives, figure eights, and they're doing it at night. And they have, some of them are still in open air cockpit engines, though most of them were flying like Texans, AT-6 Texans, B-20, the A-24, pardon me, the Vultee Vibrator, the P-19 was one of the first ones, and then if you got really lucky, you got to fly the P-51 Mustang. But Anne had ferried the B-17 Flying Fortress, so these girls were flying big planes, really big planes. They were not flying transatlantically or transpacifically. The WASPs were only flying domestically. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Did Virginia Hall lose her leg during an equestrian event?
Great question. Virginia Hall shot her own leg off when she was 23 years old. It was her first post in the foreign services. She was at the American Embassy in Izmir, Turkey. She had already been living in Europe for quite a few years. She'd gone to college there. She was already well established in that community. And she went with a few of her colleagues from the embassy to go hunting in the countryside, and it was quite muddy that day. And she had, she was in her 20s. This was 1930. I think it was 1933 that she shot her foot off. I can actually I have the exact date here. And she actually tried to launch herself over a fence while having the butt of the musket under her armpit with the barrel of the hunting, not the musket, the rifle, the barrel of the rifle pointed down toward the ground. And when she went to launch herself over the fence, her boot got stuck in the mud. And she started moving, but the rest of her body didn't start moving. And the momentum she had, her finger pulled the trigger and shot her foot off. By the time they got her to the hospital, it was gangrene had already set in, and they had to take her leg off just above the knee. So she lost her knee as well. Didn't stop her for a moment. She had, a couple days in the hospital where she was loopy, and her dead father supposedly came to speak with her and told her to keep going. And then from that point on, it was like nothing had ever happened. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible woman.
If you had to choose between the five women that are portrayed here, which one do you feel closest to?
That's a really great question. And I'll just tell you, for those of you who are wondering, the date that she shot her foot off is December 8th, 1933. So just in case that matters to you. Carolyn, if you had asked me this when I debuted this program in 2017, I would have said Virginia Hall. But as I've done the program over the last, we're going on 3 years now, Anne Baumgartner, because I want to think that I'm like really down with Virginia Hall, but I don't think I could really do what she had done. I think in many ways that I would have had qualities that would have permitted me to do what she had done, but the aspect of hiking the Pyrenees Mountains in snow up to her thighs with a prosthetic leg, and she was actually this is mentioned by Vera Atkins in the performance, but if you go into detail, she is hiking with a mountain guide and 2 men, and the mountain guide is horrified that he has to bring a woman through the Pyrenees Mountains with him, not realizing that this woman also doesn't have a leg. And then they would give them Pervitin. Pervitin was it was basically the original like methamphetamine that they were giving to these soldiers during World War II. And this speed that they were giving them allowed them to do things like hike the Pyrenees Mountains without stopping to sleep. And the other 2 men that were with Virginia Hall during that Pyrenees Mountains sojourn, they nonstop complained they couldn't go on. I can't do this. It's too cold. It's too far. We have to stop now. And she never said a word. She never said a word. And she is, I hope none of you have a lot of experience with prosthetic legs, but this thing is very heavy. This is not like, the gazelle style prostheses that they have for folks today. This is in itself is about 10, 8, 9 pounds at least. So that said, why would I say Anne Baumgartner is the one I connect more to? Because she went to Walnut Hill Girls High School, which is now called Walnut Hill School for the Performing Arts, and I went there for summer camp. So like as soon as I realized I had an actual personal connection with this girl, and she had lived in Massachusetts for a certain point of her life, and her father was involved in the Poland Springs Company, then they moved out to the Northwest. So she wasn't a New Englander by any sense of the word, but she did have time. She did go to high school at the same school that I went to theater camp at. So that's why.
What drew you to this topic, and do you have any other productions?
Yes. Who isn't drawn to World War II? It is the monumental moment in human civilization history where in the entire world collectively realized that they had to do something to stop a force from taking over. And we have a weekly live stream series. History at Play every Friday evening does a performance, a living history performance, either from our repertoire or we have guest artists on. This past Friday, we had Professor Albert Einstein on, and I learned a lot about him, in that I didn't realize he was a very strict pacifist, and until Hitler.
And he lived in Greenville.
Yes, you're right. He was more so playing his life when he was in Princeton, New Jersey. But I will let him know. He'll get such a kick out of that. I didn't realize that he changed his stance when Hitler came into power and began his genocide of the Jewish peoples, that he had really profoundly changed. And I think that struck a chord in me recently, because I think that could have been true for so many people when it was happening, right? Nobody wanted war, but just everyone sort of subliminally and consciously recognized that this was a dangerous, dangerous force, and one that would not make our human civilization better. So that's what draws me to World War II in general, is the communal sort of. It's interesting because we are as a world communally joining together in feeling very similar feelings right now, due to all of us dealing and being affected by COVID-19 in profound ways. But I think anytime you have an experience where the entire world collectively sort of gasps or unites to do something, to create something, to save something, I think that's what draws me into World War II specifically. We do have many other programs. So History at Play, I founded 10 years ago. You actually at Greenville saw one of our programs. Was it last January? Was that last January? So A Revolution of Her Own. So there's actually a picture of me as Deborah Sampson behind me. So Deborah Sampson was the first woman to fight in the American military disguised as a man. She was promoted to the rank of corporal and then honorably discharged after nearly 2 years by General Henry Knox when she was discovered for being a woman. So that was the first program that I wrote 10 years ago. I've been researching her for 15 years. Then we have a program about Lucy Stone, who is a leader in the women's suffrage movement and abolitionist movement. She actually recruited Susan B. Anthony, which many people know Susan, but they don't know Lucy. And you'll have to see the show to find out why that is exactly. And we have a program about Hedy Lamarr, who is a Hollywood film star and a technological savant. And I'm supposed to be there in June to perform for all of you as Hedy. So I hope to see you all soon. And we have a program that was commissioned by the Paul Revere House about Rachel Revere. That's Paul Revere's second wife, the wife that he had during his infamous midnight ride. So we find out what happens to people who are stuck and stranded in Boston when Revere and the Revere's out riding and the war is starting here in the American colonies. And we have a program about Krista McAuliffe, who was the teacher in space on board the Challenger shuttle. And I'm actually from Krista's hometown. So her family has given approval and has seen that performance. And that's another moment in world history where the world collectively gasped. That's why people are so intrigued by Krista McAuliffe, as they are so intrigued, totally different theme, but as they are so intrigued by people who are involved in the World War II war effort. So, and then we have guest artists every Friday evening on our Pay-Per-HAP series, which is like pay-per-view.
And Kristen and Charity have put the link to History at Play in the chat box. So if you want to look at that, that's where you find it.
Perfect.
And we're coming to a close. You will be receiving an email tomorrow that will have a link to a recording of this program. Remember, it's only up for 2 days. So if you have friends that want to see this, please let them know, but it's only up for 2 days. Or if you want to go back and see it again, we're happy to do that. So that you'll get that link tomorrow. And mark your calendars, because the next Chautauqua virtual program will be in the middle of December, the 17th. Leslie Goddard will be doing who was Typhoid Mary. If you remember, Leslie's performed for us as Amelia Earhart and Betty Davis and Clara Barton, and she did the Betty Crocker talk, our first one. And thank you so much to Kristen Bennett and Charity Rouse from Spartanburg, Chautauqua, Spartanburg, Chautauqua Library. And a great big hand, since you can't hear us. So if everybody is raise their hands.
Unmute everyone at the same time, I think. That's what I've been doing.
Okay, then we can clap.
Oh, no, I can't. Maybe I can't. Oh, yeah, I can.
Okay,
Go for it.
it's a wonderful, wonderful program. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
And all I have to
That's
say
great.
is thank you so much once more to Greenville, Chautauqua, Spartanburg Libraries, and to all of you folks and patrons who have joined us this evening. Definitely do take opportunity. We're also recording this Q&A, so you'll be able to pass that on to others as well. And promise me all that you will make history.
Yeah.
You're an extraordinary actor. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Bravo. You have to do a lot of research to do what you did.
Now, she can see.
Thank you so
it
much. This was
if-
wonderful.
if you
Bye-bye.
allow her to.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
You ready to leave?
Hey, how do I get out of the room?